which I will start right now. So again, thank you all for joining for What Are You Waiting For? Which we tested multiple times before putting out this title and had a lot of fun with it. So hopefully you enjoy it as well. Just a little bit about the Ipswich River Watershed Association. We are the voice of the Ipswich River. We work to protect nature and make sure that there is enough clean water for people, fish, and wildlife today and for our children and theirs. That is our mission, and kind of the four buckets in which we do our work are down at the bottom there: restore, protect, engage, and enjoy, bringing people together around the Ipswich River and around the watershed. Now and for future generations, all of our work looks towards these kind of four pillars. Just a quick overview of our community, which stretches all the way from Burlington, Wilmington, North Reading, Middleton, out towards Ipswich, and then eventually empties into Plum Island Sound. We are a local community-based membership organization, so over 50% of our operating budget comes from individual gifts. We have about 1,500 members across our watershed, and they have access to our trails, canoes, and kayaks, which are located here at our Ipswich headquarters, which we call Riverbend. We also offer free events throughout the year for members, including paddles on the river, walking tours, mindfulness classes, and more. So there's some QR codes there if you want to learn more about us, if you aren't already a member or just want to learn more about what we do and what we also might be up to in your community. And as I said, you can always come join us at Riverbend in Ipswich. This is a view of our lovely dock on the river. Our grounds include some walking trails, our own rain garden demonstration. And so we'd love to have you around, maybe when there's a little bit less snow on the ground. Although if you would like to come now, I would say bring your snowshoes. And again, this is just a view of our watershed, and Harley's going to talk a little bit more about, the importance of rain gardens in everywhere, but especially in watersheds like ours. But if you get a perspective of where you're zooming in from today, where you're located in the watershed, or if you're outside of it, don't worry, you are also located in a watershed. And everything you do in regards to water and how we use it and use our landscape can help protect and keep our waters clean. So I am going to turn it over to Ani from Grow Native, Massachusetts, to do a little intro about what they do. We are partnering with them on this webinar today. And also, again, we'll introduce Harley Monteiro, who's our speaker. So Ani, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Molly, and thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Ani. I'm the program manager for Grow Native Massachusetts. Just a quick little who we are. We inspire people to action on behalf of native plants and the diversity of life that they support. And so one of the things we love to do is partner with other organizations to get native plants into their programming, into more yards, and just spread the word about those ecological benefits. Molly, would you mind advancing to the next slide, please? Thank you. Um, so something that I love and keep in my mind at all times is we have this Evenings with Experts series, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Um, but one of our experts last year was Jennifer Jewell, the author of What We Sow and the host of the podcast Cultivating Place. And I am paraphrasing, but what she said was we talk about a keystone species as in a species that has an outsized impact on the ecosystem where it is. And one of the biggest examples is an oak tree, which can support Harley, correct me, 400 species of caterpillars, even more than 400 species of different caterpillars. And when you think about that impact on the environment, the introduction of that oak tree becomes a food source for just countless different animals. And for example, one chickadee needs around 7,000 caterpillars to raise one nest of chicks. And so that amount of caterpillars is not only Um, a wanted thing is a vital thing. And what Jennifer Jules said was that gardeners should consider themselves to be a keystone species, that when we enter a space, that we have such an outsized impact on it that it is unrecognizable from where it began. So when you make the choice to put a rain garden into your yard or, a pollinator meadow, you are having that outsized impact. And when you are planting native plants, you are supporting, everything from the health of the soil to the health of the raptors. It goes, all the way up. Next slide, please, Molly. And without getting into, the really scary stuff about the collapse of insects and stuff, Desiree El Narango, who is going to be one of our other Evenings with Experts speakers this year, did that research about the chickadees and the amount of caterpillars that they need. And one thing that I like to remind myself is she says the great thing about plants, insects, and birds is that if you provide the right habitat for them, they will come back. The trick is getting more people to make these small efforts that will scale up to big changes across wider areas. So, all of you being here, that's, just an incredible step forward, and we're just so excited. Next slide, please. So just one more minute about Grow Native. We have the native plant sale. So if you are thinking, where can I get all of these wonderful native plants? You can come to our plant sale in Lexington. We hold it annually, and we also have some other things. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. And I mentioned, oh no, sorry. Can we go back to Evenings with Experts? Sorry, folks. So I talked about our Evenings with Experts series. It's our annual lecture series. We have them February, March, April, and May. Our first one is tonight. It is free, open to the public. Tonight's lecture is all on Zoom. So if you want to join us, please do. And we take a lot of time to pick some really exciting speakers with great topics. So we hope you can join us. Next slide, please. We also have workshops. We have a workshop tomorrow night called Won't Get Fooled Again, about, kind of a plant this, not that workshop. Plant a witch hazel instead of a forsythia, for example. Next slide, please. And then we have our native plant pop-up markets and our native plant nursery network. Part of talking about native plants is we want everybody to know where to find them. And so you guys have the Monarch Gardener here in Ipswich and close by. And there's also Walter Kittredge's nursery. There's a whole bunch in our area, so we're very lucky. Next slide, please. We also have gatherings in the field. That's when members get together and visit a garden and talk to the person who designed it, grew it. Next slide, please. And we have our ecology actions. And so if you'd like to come on board as a volunteer, we'd love to have you. Next slide, please. And the Massachusetts Pollinator Network is now under our umbrella, and they have a habitat chat, which is much like this Lunch and Learn. Next slide, please. And thank you so much. And one of the things we love to do, as I said, is partner with other organizations. And a lot of times we get contacted to say, I would like a speaker on this topic. Can you recommend somebody? And when I was talking to Irwa about rain gardens, first person I thought of was Harley Monteiro, who is a local ecologist. He has extensive experience with wetland and rain gardens, not only through the National Park Service and Parterre Ecological, but he is also walking the walk, like right there in Wilmington, in a place very dear to his heart. And so we are just so excited to welcome him today.
All
Thank you
right,
so
with
much,
that, I'm going
Abby.
to turn it over to you, Harley.
Yes, let me share my slides. Alrighty, can everyone see that?
If we can start in slideshow, there we go.
Is it visible or is it
It's
seeing a
black
black
right
screen?
now.
Let me see. There we go. Awesome. All righty. Thank you guys so much for having me, Grow Native in Ipswich River. And thank you all for attending. Happy Black History Month and happy almost Valentine's Day to those who celebrate. A little bit about myself. I have worked for a number of years in various ecological contexts, namely National Park Service, currently with Parterre Ecological, based out of Billerica, Mass. And as Ani referenced, I'm also doing 100% volunteer, 100% community fundraised habitat restoration here in Wilmington, Massachusetts. Um, Please reach out over email if you're interested in that. And then also, I'm an avid user on the iNaturalist app and firm believer in the capacities there for ecological progress. So, what's the problem? Sometimes we get some moans and groans when you start to blame lawns, but the truth is that lawn is actually the number one crop use, well, number one water use crop in America, and it's really shocking to find out that we don't actually eat lawn. So we're using a whole lot of water on a plant that we don't even get to eat. And the other problem with lawn is they're often so dense and compacted soil that water just runs right off, and then runs right off onto asphalt, which is also impermeable. And that high level of runoff, one, can cause severe flooding. And the speed in which this water is running off also means that there's not enough time and permeable surface for that water to penetrate back into our depleted groundwater supplies. Now, this is a primary factor that perpetuates our, water shortages we get every summer when we're fighting against our ecosystem to keep our lawns looking green. And when we finally do get rain, it doesn't really move the needle a whole lot because we've already altered our landscape so much that it's not actually going back into our water supply to the level that we need it to. And on top of all this, asphalt and lawn are also loaded with contaminants, insecticides, gasoline, all sorts of litter, fertilizers, and all that runoff is going straight into our drains and into our ecosystems. There's nothing in place to filter these out. So, why do we need rain gardens? That water needs a place to go that mitigates flooding while filtering those contaminants out at the same time so they don't end up in our drinking water, agricultural land, or our ecosystems. We also need better habitats around to capture and store more CO2 to mitigate climate change, clean the very air we breathe. Lawn, very shallow, fragile root systems, they don't store a lot of CO2. And when you just think about the neighborhoods you live in and how much lawn covers your neighborhoods. I mean, it's not just the water, it's also about the, climate change impacts of replacing habitat with these very inefficient landscapes. So, on top of us, our ecosystem also needs rain gardens. Unsurprisingly, the filtering of those contaminants also benefits the wildlife too. They suffer the same consequences. And as Ani mentioned with the biodiversity crisis, if you use native plants, these gardens can provide critical habitats for hummingbirds, butterflies, native bees, and other crashing insect populations, also the bird populations that Ani mentioned, that we rely on. I like to think of it of the infamous airplane analogy, where every species on Earth, including us, is a piece of an airplane, and that airplane's flying. All right. And every species that goes extinct, you lose a piece. And if you lose too many pieces or a few of really critical pieces, it's going to keep getting harder to keep that plane in the air. All right. And our rain gardens can also serve as critical habitat islands that help reconnect fragmented habitats in urban, suburban spaces and aid in the migration of iconic pollinators such as monarch butterflies, pictured here. Is it hard? No. Let's talk about it. So, what is a rain garden? There's a multitude of different sort of versions of what a rain garden could look like, function wise, but it boils down to essentially a land feature designed to allow for collection of rainwater or, coastal like tidal flooding and storms, often, but not always in a strategic way to one, mitigate flooding of areas of a yard or a neighborhood, control erosion caused by waters coming off roofs, and provide vital filtering habitat as a buffer to protect existing adjacent habitats. As you can see, this photo, you can see the rock formation that's actually collecting water coming off the roof and allowing it to slowly sort of matriculate into the vegetated area and not cause too much erosion. So where do I make one? So this, it might be hard to tell, but this is actually my rain garden, and it's at the base of, just off screen is a pretty steep hill. And right behind the rain garden is that habitat in Wilmington that I'm restoring. It is a beautiful, wetland forest, and that water coming in off the street, coming in off the lawn, is loaded with all those contaminants we mentioned. So naturally, I decided to put this, at this naturally low-lying area of my yard where water is naturally running to anyways, put this filtering system in place. This is nature's Brita filter. And that's gonna, protect all the amphibians, all the insects that are using that habitat back there, and make sure they're not getting any of the contaminants that are coming in from my neighborhood. So identifying where to make one is as easy as just, sometimes there is an obvious place like I have where it's a low-lying spot in the yard, or maybe it's an area in the yard that's awkward or cumbersome to mow, or maybe in this case, it's low-lying and is bordering an already existing habitat that's a natural go-to, spot that makes a lot of sense for these. A lot of people also try to build one next to their driveway or walkway, areas where you don't want a lot of water to collect and you want to direct it into a safer place that also feeds the ecosystem. I will say if you're deciding to build one, make sure you call DigSafe. It's a free service and they'll map out all your utility lines, so you don't end up messing with any of that. And again, maybe your property already borders an existing wetland. In that case, use that existing wetland buffer. It's already protected by the town. Use that as your rain garden. Like much like in this photo, create that buffer so that the water has to filter through there before it gets into the core ecosystem. And if you are working in a wetland buffer, I will just say check in with your town's conservation commission first. They're usually all for it. It's really good to ask. So what will it look like? There's a couple different routes. It depends on preference and goals and capacity for maintenance. It can look very wild. Mine, as you saw in that last slide, pretty wild right now in winter. And I view that really important. It creates a lot of really great habitat, reduces my need for weeding. So there's a trade-off there. I get my flowers, I get my, aesthetic beauty, but it's in a very natural, wild context. Or, as you see in this lower photo, both these upper photos are from my rain garden. One's kind of earlier in the season, and the second one with the hibiscus flower, that's sort of as things grow up. You see the goldenrods blooming in the back, all the jewelweed around too. In this lower photo, this is a more maintained space, both for maintained for height and aesthetics. It's a very public facing space. And obviously, incredibly beautiful. You got Joe Pye flowers, you got all the black-eyed Susans. So it all depends on your capacity for maintenance, what the situation calls for. It can be super tall, super short, whatever. There's a native plant for every situation. So how do I choose the right plants? Now, this is sort of, you know, more in depth than a lot of people start with, but I think it's very important. Plant regional native species. And when I say that, a lot of people think about their state or, New England as a whole. And unfortunately, these things are made up arbitrary boundaries. They have no actual bearing to, ecological regions that actually reflect the type of species showing up in these regions. So we have gotten this idea of ecoregions more popular, and it basically breaks down your sort of administrative region into actual ecologically functioning regions that are comparable in climate and habitat types, and thus the species that will be found in each will be unique. So most of New England is either in ecoregion 58 or 59. Now there's multiple levels to these ecoregions. Level one is super broad, like, oh, the eastern hardwood forest. That's a big area. That's like almost probably a third of the US. And so I like to go with level three ecoregions. I think that's a very sound level to start with because it's still a large enough area where there's flexibility, especially in the context of climate change, but you're not working with species that are multiple states away, have no relation to your ecosystem that you might find in your yard. So again, most of southern New England is 58 or 59. Cape Cod, very unique, is 84. That's sort of like the Pine Barrens, goes down to like New Jersey. And if you live in New England, we have a really great resource to verify via GoBotany. It's a great website. Any plant you're considering, look it up on there. This can get some moans and groans too, but I say avoid cultivars. Um, we could talk about it after, but it's an evolving conversation, and there's evolving research going into this. But a lot of times the cultivars, one, they're a relic of this, you know, sort of archaic idea of gardening where we just like really insist upon asserting our like control over a plant and stripping them of autonomy. But also, a lot of times those changes we're altering for, they have direct consequences to the ecosystem. And I will say the number one cultivar type to look out for is things with red leaves. I know they're pretty, they're unique, they show out in an ecosystem that's mostly green. Those red leaves, the red is just straight poison to insects. They can no longer use that plant, and that plant has been stripped of their ecological sacred niche that they owe to that ecosystem. So avoid cultivars whenever, if ever possible. Some are derived from naturally occurring traits, which there is a time and place to allow that, but a lot of them are artificially selected and do have some real life consequences to our ecosystems with the decreased ecosystem service. And I know everyone loves the showy flowers and all that, but aim to have our grasses, rushes, and sedges be at least 5%. That's not a scientific number, but it's important to incorporate them to some degree because they are integral to the makeup of a functioning ecosystem. A lot of them I find have a lot of like really unique like textural aesthetics in a well-established rain garden. So they're important ecologically. They do support a lot of caterpillars and butterflies, even if their flowers are pollinated by wind. They are a great host plant, just like milkweed and monarchs. Decide what you're looking for. Like I said, there's a native plant for every situation. You could do tall, short, arena style, which I like to experiment with a lot, where you have taller stuff in back, shorter stuff by, if it's by your walkway or by, a place you don't want tall stuff flopping in, arena style. Make sure like kind of like bleachers at an arena, keep the taller stuff in back so it's not shading out the shorter stuff and keep it off the walkways. Again, there's a plant for every situation. Some rain gardens are naturally going to have more moisture than others. Some are going to be drier. It all depends on your conditions and what your goals are. And then is there specific wildlife you want to target? Sometimes there's really great plants to plant for hummingbirds, but aren't necessarily going to bring in the monarchs. And there's really great plants for are non-native agricultural honeybees, but that's not necessarily going to support our bumblebees, which are the actual species that are in decline and need saving. So it's all about, thinking about what you want the space to look like, how you want it to function, and if there's any specific wildlife you really, want to target. And again, right plant, right place. Those four words apply to almost everything in gardening. Don't waste money on plants that aren't going to do well in your situation. They're just going to be outcompeted by the plants that are better suited, and they're not going to be putting out a ton of ecological support if they're not very happy in your garden. And as Ani touched upon too, nursery matters. And I'll go into this more. I'll list a bunch of great options later in the slideshow, but please do not shop at the big commercial stores like Home Depot or Lowe's. Find a reputable, ideally local, that does not use insecticides. I've heard so many horror stories of people, especially with the milkweed thing. It's like we plant the milkweed for the monarchs. You buy the milkweed, the monarchs come lay their eggs, and all the caterpillars die. So it's really tragic, and that's why it's so important to find reputable native plant sources that aren't kind of cosplaying themselves in this movement, but not with the right intentions. Maintenance, boo, scary. Everyone hates maintenance. The good thing is rain gardens can be extremely low maintenance. I've had mine going for 5 years now, and the biggest time for maintenance is in the spring, and in the establishment period. And once plants are established, once there's a good coverage and you're not getting a lot of weeds, that maintenance becomes super manageable, and is really only just like once a year. So the main three pillars come down to watering, especially in after planting that first summer. And the first few weeks are pretty critical for the transplant shock, but that first summer can be brutal to new plantings. And so I always like to say plant in fall, give them a head start. A lot of people think spring is the sort of common sense time to plant. But there's been a lot of research that shows planting in fall really gives just that extra buffer before they get to the really brutal summer weather. And they're already settled in for winter. They go to sleep, come back in spring, and you might even get blooms in that first few months. Weeding out non-native plants, again, please plant only native. There's a lot of invasive species still legal for sale in Massachusetts. I won't get into that, but if you plant native, the good thing is you don't have to worry about that. And in that early establishment phase, there will be some weeding to do, and it's important to make sure those species are sort of edited out of a garden before they, end up making you waste all that money you spend on your native plants by outcompeting them. I will say I highly recommend using the iNaturalist app. I don't like apps that only rely on photo recognition software. iNaturalist app is really great because if you post the observation, you get real human eyes. Kind of a crazy concept these days. Yeah, you get real human eyes looking at the observation, confirming for you before you make a decision on your garden. Again, with the weeding and invasive management, if you're in a wetland buffer, reach out to your town's conservation commission and discuss approved methods. And in time, some weeding of native species may be warranted to maintain diversity over time, especially if one or two species start to fill a space. But on the bright side, that is a good sign that those are the species best suited to your location. But if you really want to maintain diversity, we are natural stewards, and it is totally a-okay to sort of maintain that diversity through weeding some natives or just transplanting them. Maybe there's another spot in your yard. Maybe you have a neighbor who wants them. There's always alternatives. Um, One of my favorite parts about rain gardens is you never have to mow again. You can basically let it go all winter, and I almost require it for anyone who is attending this. Please don't cut them down in winter. That's incredible bird food. Over the winter, they're naturally evolved to be above the snow, so the birds can naturally disperse their seeds over winter. And if you chop that down in fall, not only are you taking away that vital, winter food for these birds, but you're also taking away vital overwintering habitat for the insects that live in the stems. So chop it down once a year. We say 18 inches to 24 inches once a year in early spring. You can just drop those right down into the garden. I don't recommend sort of bagging them up and composting because you might be taking away insects or seeds that haven't dispersed yet. You want to keep all that in the ecosystem. And 18 to 24 just leaves a nice little nesting stem for a lot of those pollinators we're trying to support. A lot of them live inside stems over the year. They make their little home in there. It's nice and cozy, protected from predators. So it's a good practice to leave those stems a little higher to allow that habitat and those homes to persist. And my absolute favorite one, the anti-maintenance, leave the leaves. I will say in most situations, some rain gardens do require taking them out to really allow very high quality drainage. These are more for the like very industrial rain gardens that are, taking in a ton of stormwater, ton of runoff. But in most situations, like you can see in my garden, I didn't pick up a single leaf, and I absolutely cherished all that free time I had this fall to get out into my habitat restoration project on the weekends and get to do some more important work. The Many of our insect pollinators are living in those leaves over the winter. Your fireflies, that's where your fireflies are going. If you're removing your leaves, that's why you're not seeing fireflies. And so we have to go into this with the idea that if we're, trying to create this habitat to benefit the pollinators and the insects, because we understand and acknowledge we rely on them, we have to keep that consistent in every aspect of our garden. We have to, leave the stems over winter. We have to do these things because we know it actually makes a difference. And on the plus side, the leaves then become free fertilizer for your garden, so there's zero fertilizing ever needed. Now, I'll just give you guys a few moments. I won't list off every species. If you guys want to take a screenshot of this or a picture, or otherwise, this recording will be posted and circulated. So, and these are some staples for, you have a sunny garden. I say at least 3+ hours for these species. And with the note that some of these species may prefer sort of the drier upper rim of a rain garden, not necessarily down at the bottom where it's going to be um, a lot more water content. But a lot of these species are very tolerable of fluctuations. And these are sort of staples in the idea of, you know, bucket list plants to think about if you have a sunny situation. These are plants that really, really move that ecological needle in a positive direction. And they're all herbaceous. I guess that's another thing worth saying is, um, I don't, sometimes we plant woody shrubs and even some trees in rain gardens, but to keep it simple and keep the maintenance simple, I recommend keeping it to herbaceous. It keeps it simpler a lot. We have a lot of forested area in our region as a whole, and I think the most critical habitats we're lacking is these, sunny, very heavy on the wildflowers and grasses. those kind of habitats, and that is directly correlated to a lot of our insect decline. They just don't have their plants anymore. And I'll give you guys a moment to do the same. But this one, a lot of people think, oh, I have too much shade. I can't grow anything. I highly disagree. This is a beautiful region we live in. There's heavily forested region overall, and so there's a lot of species that can handle a surprising amount of shade. With again the same asterisk that some of these species may prefer to be on the slightly drier edges, but can still handle the fluctuations. And some of these species may prefer to have some of that more sunny areas, maybe on the peripheries of a shady rain garden. As always, just do your research. There's a plant for every situation, every height, and every condition. So, where do I get my plants? The great news is here in New England, we have a ton of really great retail options available to anyone. And I've listed a bunch here. We got Grow Native, of course, their annual sale and pop-up markets, Native Plant Trust, Blue Stem Natives, Oak Haven Sanctuary, that's Walter Kittredge, New England Wetland Plants, Northeast Pollinator Plants, Bagley Pond Farm, Wild Seed Project, just to name a few that I have had good experiences with. This is not an exhaustive list. There are so many great resources in our region to find really great plants. For more ambitious project ideas you're not sure you're willing to personally undertake, consider reaching out to my company, Parterre Ecological. They've done some pretty high intensity rain gardens, and they'll cover all the planting as well. And for the tougher to find species, there are some backup options through reputable online nurseries, and these are a few that I have personally had great success with, and I can actually vouch for. But again, I highly recommend we focus on the local nurseries. Always shop local when you can. You're getting a lot better you're getting a lot better return. That money's staying in your local economy, and also you're getting a higher chance that those species are locally adapted to your ecosystem because you're buying them locally. A lot of these places are growing them from local sources. Thank you all so much for watching. Uh, I can confidently say that we are all best friends now. And if you ever need stewardship advice or help finding a species, please reach out to me via that email. I'll leave this out for a minute. You guys want to write that down or take a picture. I'm always happy to help anyone. I love this work. I do it, as you guys know, in my free time with my restoration work, iNaturalist. I love this work and I go to sleep thinking about this work every day. So please reach out if you ever have any questions or help finding any of those really cool niche species. I have personally sourced every species that I mentioned. So yeah, I definitely know where to find them. And please, at that same email, if you are at all interested in helping out in my restoration project, restoring this really special place here in the Ipswich River watershed, woo woo, please reach out over email. Thank you so much. And yeah,
Thank-
we'll turn it over for questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Harley. That was awesome. There's already some questions in the chat, and what I'm
Oh
going to
boy.
do is, before I get to those, I wanted to ask you a question about just overall. You provided some great resources for plants and where to source things and finding out more about the plants that you want to use. Is there any other places when thinking about like rain garden design that you might recommend people check out if they're just kind of looking for like a planting plan? Um, do you have any thoughts on that?
Hmm. I'm not sure. That's a great question. I can definitely do some brainstorming on that and um, provide more
Yeah,
later.
I will say I might get run by a couple by you, one from our greenscapes work that we do at Ipswich River.
Mm.
And, we'll send those as we find that, we'll send that out to everyone in our follow-up email. But let's get to some Q&A
Right.
that I see in the chat already. And I'm just going to go in the order that this was received. So we have, why chop the stems? Remember a few slides back.
Yeah, why chop the stems? It's sort of so this is in reference to when we're doing our yearly maintenance in the spring. Some people do just have the zero maintenance option, which is never cut anything and yeah, and that's totally okay. You're definitely not harming the ecosystem, I'd say. If you chop the stems, a lot of our native species are hollow inside, or they have like a pit that's more easily, easier to chew than trying to enter from the outside. And so it's kind of like I've been taught that it's kind of like the low-hanging fruit, and that, if that's available for a nesting spot, they'll use that, and they'll prefer that versus trying to enter a stem a more difficult way.
All right. And next, so wondering what the main differences, i.e. startup, plant choice, and maintenance are between a rain garden and a meadow when looking at it from a lawn to XYZ perspective. So for rain gardens, is it the native plant choice for those that do well in swampy, moist conditions, and possibly less maintenance and startup work than for a meadow?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think so. In terms of like ecologically speaking, a meadow is kind of like meadows in the wild do have a lot of like moisture fluctuation, but a lot of times when we're talking native plant gardening, we think of meadows as, just sunny and dry and full of wildflowers. So there is a conversation to be had there. But I think, yeah, it's mainly just the plant choice. There's some species, like one of my favorites is butterfly milkweed, Asclepias tuberosa. Not, in my experience, the most suited for a rain garden. They don't love a ton of moisture content in the soil. And so those species I mentioned are all that I have personally had success with in at least like a moist or fluctuating situation. And some of those love like saturated water. Like there's a whole spectrum within those species I listed of, tolerance. And that's why, research your plants going in, see which ones want to be at the bottom where that water is pooling, and see which ones probably want to be on the upper edges. I think a good example is marsh marigold. If you have a really wet situation where there's even standing water at some points, don't even hesitate. Marsh marigold, super early spring, giant yellow flower, tolerates almost total shade in my experience, and incredibly beautiful and does not care one bit about being in the water. So always research your plants. And yeah, I think that's the main difference is just finding the plants that'll tolerate those moisture regime fluctuations.
Awesome. All right, next one. These are getting into some specifics, but I think you got it. If there is already mountain laurel in the space I'm thinking for a rain garden, would that be disadvantageous?
No, no, definitely not. Mount Laurel is an incredible species, so beautiful. The flowers are great, evergreen. It's don't fight what you already have, especially if what you already have is a native plant. Mountain laurel's great too. It's not all about marsh marigold and grasses and black-eyed Susan. So, um, yeah, I think even if you have a giant oak tree, and that's why your garden has so much shade. Oak trees are number one in our region, definitely, and in most regions of the U.S. So it's like whatever situation you got going, there's native plants that are going to thrive alongside mountain laurel and provide great benefit. Um, like when I like recommend it against like woody species, it's mainly to keep that like that flower diversity, that grass diversity, and maintain it. Especially, here in New England, our ecosystems are very quick to reforest. And so in that first or second year, you're going to get pine ceilings, you're going to get oak ceilings, you're going to get maples. And again, just like weeding out the native flowers that are starting to become more ubiquitous in the garden, it's okay to transplant those out. Um, maybe you have a neighbor who might be interested in a tree. Maybe you have another spot in the yard where there's a appropriate spot for your tree. Maybe you're adjacent to actual habitat where it's perfectly reasonable to take that little maple, put it into the actual existing habitat. There's always a solution. And yeah, so woody species are great. They host a ton of caterpillars and are directly correlated to our bird populations. But um, it's more about maintaining that sort of diversity in the rain garden that's more important. Um, when I recommend it against, loading up a woody species.
All right, I'm going to throw it to Ani real quick and then get to a couple more questions. But
I just wanted to say really quickly that our website, grownativemass.org, if you go to the resources tab, not only will you find native plant nurseries and seed sources that are, closest to you, but we also have plant lists, some landscape guides. I don't think that we have one for rain gardens. So Harley, I'm going to commission you for that. Um, but we certainly do have plant and pollinator guides, suggestions, Robert Jagir's list of top pollinator species, etc. And before I forget, both Harley and I are going to be at Riverfest, and Grow Native will be having a native plant pop-up market. So we'll be bringing some of the local native plant nurseries in the Ipswich River Watershed, and Harley will be talking about his project. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't forget that.
no, thank you.
Very
I
cool.
was going to mention that as well. So Riverfest is our kind of annual celebration of the river. It's at Ipswich River Park in North Reading. It'll be Sunday, June 14th, from 11 to 2 this year. And yes, Ani will be there. Grow Native will be there with a native plant sale. So come visit us. It'll be great. And Harley, do you have time for more questions? Because we've got some more in the chat.
Yeah, let's keep it. I think to really quickly with Ani's point about Dr. Jagir's list, incredible list that literally shows you which declining bumblebee species need the most help. And that's a list that I've used in my own work and I use to help populate the species I recommended to you guys. I will also shout out Doug Talamy's Native Plant Finder website, some incredible research behind that, directly tied to, our declining bird populations and our declining insect populations. Native Plant Finder, put in your zip code, you'll find which species move the needle the most in terms of insect support and bird support in your area.
Right. Awesome. So next question. Do you recommend rain gardens for small urban yards? I've seen articles suggest that rain gardens be placed 20 plus feet away from the foundation, and that's practically my whole front yard.
I'd be curious if that's I'd be curious what the recommendation was for, if it was for just like keeping the flooding out of basements. I'm sure it's very conditional on what your specific setup is. But I have totally seen rain gardens in very small, compact places. And again, just do your homework, call DigSafe, make sure there's nothing underneath there that's you're going to be impacting. Um, and yeah, I'm hesitant to give like a professional, like 100% yes, a professional advice answer, like right next to a foundation, of course, where there could be something there. But I have personally seen rain gardens in very compact places, and maybe it doesn't have to be a rain garden. Maybe it can just be a regular native plant garden, and that is also super cool.
Yeah, so that actually leads nicely into the next question, which is, do I need to dig a basin and fill some portions with rocks, gravel, as we saw in one picture, or just plant into the soil that's in place? And so that kind of gets to this question of what you just brought up, rain garden, native plant garden, and functionality there.
Yeah, I think for a lot of folks there might be a logical place in the yard that makes a lot of sense. It already kind of pitches in one area. Maybe you notice in the spring water already pools in a certain spot in the yard and it gets all mucky and gross. But for a lot of folks, maybe there isn't a logical area to identify. And in that case, you can totally dig and build one. It doesn't have to be this big sort of production with importing gravel and different soils and all that, although it can. And I've been part of some really awesome projects where you make a rain garden from scratch. But it can be as simple as just changing the pitch and the grade a little bit. Again, make sure you know where you're digging and know what's underneath you. But yeah, it doesn't have to be a big production if that's an intimidating factor. I want this to be something accessible and exciting to everybody. I didn't do any digging or altering for mine. Of course, like mine is already very obviously positioned. But I didn't have to change the grade or import gravel or anything. Yeah, it's all dependent on situation, but there's some version of a native plant garden for everyone. And as a bonus, rain gardens are really great for our own health and our ecosystem, and we both need them. So if you have the capacity for one, go for it.
For the arena approach, is there a preferable approach for how to lay that out on a slope, i.e., putting the taller plants lower on the hill?
I love this. Wait, that could actually come out looking really cool because if you really dial it down perfectly, it could almost make like a flat like show of flowers if they're all blooming at the same time. I guess it depends on where you're viewing the hill from. Like if the hill is downhill from where you're most often viewing it from, I could totally see that. Um, if you're usually viewing it from the downhill side, I wouldn't put the tall stuff on the lower portion. I would still put it further up top, just so it's not blocking your view of the shorter stuff higher up. And it all depends on species. Some of those species I mentioned can be total giants, like cutleaf Susan, can be over my head. Not to out my height, uh, so there can be real giants, and then there can be species that are only like 3 or 4 feet tall. There's, species I mentioned that are total ground cover. So it's all situation dependent, but I love the idea of playing with the topography and playing with how that can produce a really cool aesthetic. Um, but yeah, I think it depends on which way you're viewing that hill.
Awesome. And I noticed that someone posted that there's a Yukon app named Rain Gardens that can help you, supposed to help you guide you through the process. Um, so thanks for that. All right, we'll have time for one last question, and then for those that we don't get to, I will take them down and we will try to get some answers to you if that's all right, Harley.
Yeah,
Or we can go over by a couple of minutes. We'll see this here. All right.
yeah, me too.
I so this question is, I think my lawn grass causes my yard to be wet with runoff and compaction. If I'm planning to remove it, is it a mistake to plant a rain garden in the current wet areas?
So I guess it depends if by remove it they mean like literally bringing up the sod or just like there's ways to just kill your lawn in place. Some are non-chemical, of course. And so yeah, I guess it depends, but if that's the area where the water, you know, make it easy on yourself, listen to the water. There's a really great quote um about water. Who was the who was the author? Maybe Toni Morrison or Maya Angelou. Water will just remember. All right. Water's always just gonna find a way to remember and listen to the water. Don't try to fight the water. Yeah, water's gonna find a way. So if that's the area it's already showing, then work with that. That's an incredible cue and saves a lot of time and effort. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Ani. All water has a
Thank you,
perfect
honey.
memory, and it is forever trying to get back to where it was.
Yeah. Yeah, and then she's like, "Oh, they say the water is flooding." And no, actually it's just remembering, but we call it flooding. I forget the exact quote, but it's incredible and yeah, it's beautiful.
All right, and then let's hit this last question that I see in the chat here. Are black raspberries a good choice? They grow all over the wild area of my yard, along with goldenrod.
I actually I'm not gonna bring the slides back up, but in my garden there's a little patch of black raspberry. I know for some folks they can go crazy and be one of those species that definitely um very expressive in a garden, very bold, and can be one of those species that can really take up a lot of space. I really like them because I've actually planted some sensitive species, like sensitive to rabbits, in and around the black raspberry, just to experiment, like because my black raspberry patch is not very bold. It's still pretty open, and I'm trying to experiment to see if there's some like natural rabbit protection they can help me with. Um, I think it depends on space and willingness for a space to really express themselves. Like you don't want black raspberry in like the earlier question about like really tight, like urban, like right near a house or walkway. Those those bolder species, not a great choice for a small space where you're really trying to maximize biodiversity. But if they seed in and you have the space and you have the capacity for maintenance, let it happen. Raspberries are an incredible host plant species, incredible for the birds, incredible pollinator plant for our nectar loving insects. So they deserve a time and place in our ecosystems for sure, and they get a bad rep for the thorns. But yeah, experiment and see what works for you guys.
All right. Well, with that, since it is 1 minute past 1 o'clock, I want to thank everyone for attending today. Thank you so much to Ani and Harley for helping us with this webinar, and Harley, especially for all of your expertise and time during this. We really, really appreciate it. It's been absolutely fascinating. And as I said, we did record the webinar, which I will stop in just a minute. We will send that out along with the slides so you have those resources. And yeah, we hope to see you guys sometime in the spring. And if you have any questions, as Harley said, please feel free to reach out. So thanks again, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your day.